Before we get started in this video, there's one thing I want to point out. There's a good chance that you actually want to use the Q option group component rather than the QRadio component. So with the radio component, you render each radio component individually. With the Q option group component, you can basically render all of your radio buttons with one component. So at the end of this video, I'll show you how to use radio buttons inside of the Q option group component. But in this video, I'll show you the radio component. So let's dive in and actually get some examples out there so you better understand what I mean. Q-radio, we're going to want to v-model whatever is selected. So let's say selection, and then we'll come down here and say const selection is equal to a reference, and we'll make that nothing by default. Make sure I spell const correctly, save it, and there we go. There's our radio button. Now, we need to know what the selection is going to look like. So we can say val is equal to car, for example. And now when I select this, selection is going to be equal to car. And I'll quickly show you that by saying pre, and then we'll spit out the selection there. So now I select it, and then it changes to car. So what we can do now is basically just copy paste this down and have a few more options. Car, motorbike, and what's another vehicle? Maybe we'll do truck as well, or boat. That would be cool. And there we go. We've got all of these options that we can select. Of course, another thing we can do is add a label. So let's say label is equal to car, and I'll just copy paste these down and then change those two to label. There we go. So now we can select those different options with a label. And to simplify things, I'm going to remove these radio buttons so we can just focus on one for now. Another thing we can do is change the checked icon. So we can set that to task_alt to get a slightly different icon there. There we go. So that looks kind of cool. We also have an unchecked icon, and we can set that to something like cancel. There we go. So it's not selected, and then a check when it is selected. Another thing we can do is make it dense, so it uses up slightly less space. Dense. And this is going to make more sense when you have a few checkboxes next to each other. In fact, I'll quickly show you that. And there we go. By saying dense, it removes a bit of the padding, whereas if we get rid of dense there, everything is a little bit more separated. So that's good to know. Back to a simpler example. What else can we do? We can also say color and set that equal to something like purple. And that means when it's checked, we get this nice purple color. And if you want that color to remain with the border, we can say keep-color. So what this means is we get that purple border, and then when we select it, it's purple as well. So keep color just adds a little bit more theming, I guess you could say, to that component. We can also say disable, which means we can no longer check this. That's good to know. Another thing we can do is say size and set it equal to something like extra large. And then we go all the way down to extra small. Or you can put in something custom like 120 pixels. There you go. That is a huge checkbox. Let's just go back to maybe large so it's easy for you to see. There we go. What else can we do? We can also throw the label onto the other side by saying left-label. And that chucks it onto the other side. And that's pretty much it for the API. Now let me show you how we can use QRadio inside of some other components. For example, a Q item. I'm going to cut this, Control X, and then say Q-item, Q-item-section, and then this section is going to have that radio button. Now, it doesn't actually look any different because we need this to be inside of a list. Let's wrap that in a list. Oh, and that should be a Q-list, and then we'll make it bordered. Bordered. Make sure I've got the R in there. And there we go. We've got our list with our radio button inside of there. And then you can imagine you'd have another Q item section here. And then this one might have like some lorem ipsum text. Let's try that. Oh, and we need to make sure that this is on its own. So I'll select that, hold Alt, press down so that it's outside of the item section. There we go. Now, one more thing that we do in this case is make sure that this knows it's a side item. So notice how it's taking up half the space and then the text is taking up half the space. If we come up here and say, hey, Quasar, this is a side item, it means this is only going to take up enough space for what needs to show the radio box. And there we go. That's about it for the radio component. As I mentioned, I'm going to quickly show you now how to use this in an option group. Q-option-group. tab, and then let's v-model selection. So far, most of this is the same. Then we can come in here and say what the options are, and the values for these options are going to be the same as when we use the radio button. So let's say options there, save it, and then we'll go ahead and add some options in. Const options is equal to, and we'll make this an array of objects. And then imagine that what we're putting in here is going to be passed through to the underlying radio component. So for example, we set the value. So we'll say value is equal to car. And then we'll also say label is equal to car. And we'll put a capital C here. Add a comma, refresh the page, and there we go. That's now working. We can add some more in by just adding to these options. Copy that, paste it down a couple of times. And then this one, we'll set it to truck. And then this one, truck. And then we'll add in boat as well. So this is just a nicer way to model the data rather than having to iterate over all of the options yourself using the QRadio component. We can just throw those options directly into the Q option group, which is really cool. Now it's selecting them all, and I think that might be because instead of val, this is supposed to be the full word value. Yeah, there we go. And now we can easily select different options. So there you go. That's the Q option group component using radio. And before that, I showed you the Q radio component. All right, I'll see you in the next video.